if you're not talking to your customers often, then you're missing a trick, right? Because essentially, if you're in the technology game like we are, we're always trying to strive for what's known as product market fit. We're trying to develop a product or product set or a new product that best fits the needs of the market. You can't guess that in isolation. If you're guessing, you're missing the mark, or what the maka, as we say in Māori.
You want to make it as simple as possible for your customers to pay their bills, to improve the customer experience and reduce debtor days. But even the current automated invoice generation systems rely on customers opening the emails, filing, preparing, and manually going into their banking platforms to create those payments. What if your invoices could automatically be received, paid, and stored without any hassle or delay? Well, BlinkPay is all about taking the pain out of payments, and their vision is to create an ecosystem where you can do just that and a whole lot more. Our guest this week is Adrian Smith, Product Manager for BlinkPay, a Māori fintech startup that designs digital payment solutions based on open banking APIs. He studied at Waikato University, where he's earned a master's degree in marketing strategy and information systems, moved to London in 2006 to work in digital automation of the banking industry, and during his 15 years abroad, he's worked for large banks such as Barclays and Lloyds Bank. Today, Adrian's taking us through a journey of product development, quantitative and qualitative research, and how embedding Māori values in Tikanga throughout the entire BlinkPay business helps in all they do. Well, Adrian Smith from BlinkPay, welcome, my friend. It is a joy to have you on the podcast. And tell us, we always kick off with this. Give us the 2-minute life story of Adrian Smith as it means to where you are today.
Oh, okay. Kia ora. Tēnā Koe, Glenn. So I am Adrian. I am a Māori boy born and raised in Hamilton. I have spent my whole career pursuing building digital products and services. Back in 1995, when the interweb made its way into Waikato University computer labs, I kind of looked at it and I thought, and I said to the lads, I said, I think this thing's going to change the world around us. And not everyone shared my enthusiasm for it, but I've spent the last 26-ish years pursuing this, wrote my thesis on it and everything. And so more recently, I've spent the last 14 years doing big bank transformation in the UK, where I worked for Lloyds Banking Group, as well as the director of Barclays Business Bank. And so I came home in March. And then on my return to New Zealand, I kind of looked at the financial services industry and thought to myself, oh, we're a little bit behind the times. And I met some really cool people from BlinkPay, and the founder in particular, Daniel Karihana, and he started talking to me about open banking. And I was like, oh, bro, I built that years ago. He's like, yeah, well, we're still trying to figure it out. And I went, oh, I'm not sure I want to go back in time. And then we kept on chatting because he's very, very good on relationship building. And so we kept on having kōrero. And then he eventually got me to see it through the lens of, since you've already built this before, you kind of know where the puck is going, to quote the great Wayne Gretzky, right? You know, he'd always skate to where the puck is going. He's like, so you know where the puck's going to go. And I'm like, not supposing you put it that way. He's like, so you could potentially help us avoid some of the pitfalls and maybe shortcut a few of the things. I went, hey, when you say it that way, yeah, I can see that. And so, I actually ended up buying into him, the individual, because he's quite a charismatic and an understated way kind of guy. And I said, I believe in you, bro. I'm going to come join the crusade. And so joining BlinkPay for me is a case of I wanted to give back to New Zealand, having spent a lot of time overseas. And in particular, I wanted to contribute to Māori. And so this felt like the easiest way to achieve both those goals.
Yeah, fascinating story, man. Yeah, Hamilton boy, done good, gone global, now coming back, giving back. And tell me a little bit about BlinkPay, or tell our audience a little bit about BlinkPay, because for me, I look at BlinkPay and I'm like, this is a fascinating play.
Yeah, so for us, we're trying to create what I refer to as connective tissue. We're trying to connect the banks and the billers and the merchants, and we're trying to bring them all together into a single ecosystem. And at the moment, New Zealand's building open banking APIs, which is that connective tissue. And so what we're trying to do, and my shorthand, my tagline for it is, we're just trying to make payments painless. And so we consider ourselves a fintech, although if we took a narrow definition, we're actually a pay technology company. We just focus on payment capabilities at the moment. And we're trying to find better ways to help Kiwis make payments. And so when we say better, we're trying to find ways to remove friction. We want the experience on the glass, whether it be on a mobile app or a desktop computer. We want it to have the least amount of clicks, the least amount of cognitive effort possible. And so our kind of central thesis is, if we can put a solution as close to the problem as possible, we're probably going to make a difference. And so kind of our flagship product is our bills product, whereby we're creating relationships with the billers and the banks to actually take the bill and put it in your online bank in a meaningful way. So, and this is pretty much the origin story of the company. So it's about 7 years ago, I think it was, Dan was trying to deal with some bills. He had invoices and he had paper, and he was looking at his desktop, and he was trying to go into his online bank, and he was trying to manage his cash flow. And in a very typical Māori response, he's like, oh, this is hoha, man. Must be an easier way of doing this. And so that was kind of where it started, with an everyday human problem of, I'm trying to manage this stuff. I'm having to switch context between paper and screens and calculators. And why can't this all be together? So I can just go, yep, go, no, stop. And so that's the genesis of BlinkPay. That's where it started. And so since 2018, Dan and the team prior to my arrival have been working very hard to build new payment capabilities that try and bring the solution as close to the problem as possible.
Mm-hmm. So for an aging, decrepit brain like the one that I have, and I'm sure there'll be a few people that have got questions out there, can you just give a use case scenario? For example, like I'm dealing with the mechanic and he wants to invoice me. What would that look like as a customer, as a user journey using BlinkPay?
Well, what I'll do is I'll talk to our primary use cases around billers, like a big one, and then I'll answer that use case second, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's assume, personal experience. So I get my Vodafone bill via email. Mm-hmm. It goes in there, and then do I file it or not? That's a decision point for me. And then I have this whole moment of, oh God, I have to do something about this. When do I have to do something about this? In 17 days, I've got time. So then I file it or not. Then I have to try and find it or not. And then I try and go, okay, and how do I pay this thing? So now I'm trying to go through my bills in my email, and then trying to log into my online bank or my mobile app. And then I'm trying to find that biller as a beneficiary or a recipient if I set them up. And then I'm trying to figure out, okay, how much do I have to pay? So I'm trying to figure all these things out. And so what Bills does is it basically does this thing where we have a relationship with Vodafone, and we say, right, we want to connect the Vodafone data up to your bank. And so for argument's sake, let's say it's BNZ. And so we sign a bilateral agreement with Vodafone and say BNZ. And then within that bilateral agreement, that then allows us to then feed the bills from Vodafone into BNZ, into the customer's accounts who are banked by BNZ. What does that mean in practice? I can go into my online bank and I'm organizing my life. And I've got a bills dashboard that says in one place, here are all your bills. And I've got sitting within that list, well, here's your Vodafone bill. It's actually due in 6 days. Would you like to pay now? And if the cost looks about right, you go, oh, cool. So you hit pay, confirm, bill paid. Done like a done thing. Another variant on that, if you are a bookkeeper or a cash flow manager, you'd have the ability to say, well, actually, that's due in 6 days. I'm going to set that at the future date of 6 days. So it just happens in the background. I don't have to think about it, and I can just mark that as paid and move on with the next task in my activity. Coming to your simple use case that you sort of suggested, one of the things we're looking at a sort of a merchant or a smaller business type of level is I am generating an invoice. So Glenn, Marvin, the plumbers come around and fixed my sink, and you sort of say, I'm going to send you an invoice. I'm like, sweet as. So you generate your invoice on whatever platform makes sense to you. Maybe it's like a Xero or something like that. You then send me the invoice. And if we've integrated properly, I'll get an email that'll have a pay now button on it or something like that. I click that pay now, and then I'll have the option to say, all right, would you like to pay from using your banking account using these rails? And so you go, okay, I do that. So then you follow that, you give consent to actually to pay from your bank account in your bank account. And then I can just go, all right, pay Glenn Marvin, and everything's pre-populated. So there's no user errors around incorrect account information. I'm not typing in the wrong things. There's no issues around misdirected payments. I hit go. And because it's built on open banking APIs, part of the API is then establish, is there an available balance or not? Oh, actually there is in the receiving account, on the standing account. Okay, cool. Hit send. And so the money goes. There's no dishonored payments. It all happens in real time because your APIs give real time interactions of what's going on. Everything happens real time.
Making payments painless.
That's what I'm trying for. That's what we're trying for collectively.
That's great, man. So how integral are things like customer interactions and feedback and things like that into what sort of part do they play in planning and prioritizing development and identifying issues within the product?
So it's really interesting because if you're not talking to your customers often, then you're missing a trick, right? Because essentially, if you're in the technology game like we are, we're always trying to strive for what's known as product market fit. We're trying to develop a product or product set or new product that best fits the needs of the market. You can't guess that in isolation. If you're guessing, you're missing the mark, or what the maka, as we say in Māori. So what you ideally want to be doing is, in the case of our business, which is B to B to C, we have a slightly odd model whereby our customers are actually other businesses, but the actual end users are someone else. And so we have this two-tier strategy, right? So thankfully, our initial focus is on the larger businesses. So we have, 2 or 3 key people within a large business. And sort of as a policy, because I'm the product guy, I want to be talking to them as often as possible. So I try to talk to at least one customer every day. But on an average week, it's once every second day. I'm talking to customers and I'm constantly asking questions to understand. And then once we start to understand from a qualitative perspective, what does an ideal solution look like, we then start to design it up with our customers, and we start to do co-creation sessions to try and figure out what makes the most sense. And then ultimately, we then try and take that out into the labs, and we try and test it with actual end users. We'll say, look, we think this might be useful and helpful. What do you think? And then we then dispassionately let them have a go at it, and we try and then assess kind of their level of interaction. And of course, if you've ever done qualitative testing in a lab, you know that what people say and what they do don't always align.
Mm-hmm.
But what it does do is it helps you refine the solution you're trying to build. And then if we're really clever and really smart, we then try and then take whatever our refined solution is and then put it into a quantitative setting. So the business I came from in the UK, we had a beta version of the app where you could basically put code in there, get it out in the wild with real customers, thousands of real customers, and get actual live feedback on, is this any good or not? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that feedback from the partners like the banks as well as businesses, what sort of questions do you ask, and what are you trying to achieve as part of that feedback process?
It's really interesting. One of the things I learned doing user experience testing is you ask someone, hey, what do you want? And they're like, a better horse. Whereas if you ask a very different question where you sort of say, well, what are kind of the key challenges that you're trying to deal with? What are your struggles, your pain points? What's the people in your shoe that irritates you? What are the things that you've had to design, very unique and potentially rigged together solutions just to get jury-rigged to get around the problem? And so ultimately, when you ask questions to try and understand kind of what are the key challenges that people are trying to do, or what goals are they trying to achieve, that then allows you to then start to understand potentially where you can generate new solutions or refine what you have. So it's very much a focus on what are the things that they're getting tripped up by? Because if you're going to try and design a solution to an existing problem that has existing solutions, then doing something that's marginally better won't get it done. You typically, the behavioral science says it needs to be at least 9 times better. This is kind of the work from Eric Ries and the Lean Startup. But if you're doing something that's brand new for the first time, just finding where people fall over and then solving for that can get you a long way down the path.
How often is it that you have been in an environment where you find people are asking questions that are predetermined to try and help engineer an outcome that they already want?
It happens a lot, and I think it sounds like you know that as well, where one of the things you've got to be wary of is the echo chamber, right? You're just asking questions to validate what you think you know. And one of the problems I've seen with that in my experience working in large organizations is oftentimes people are only trying to find anything that validates their hypothesis. And so oftentimes you find people have got solutions that they're looking for problems for, which I found really irritating. Hey, we've got a solution. What's the problem? We got a solution. Yeah, but what's the problem?
We've got to go and find it.
And always trying to, retrofit a problem to the solution you've already built has never worked from my experience. I'm happy for someone to correct me and take this up with me separately, but I've never seen it work. And so critically, it's around having an open mindset. Like, you need to be asking to understand, not asking to validate what you think you know. Otherwise, what's the point in talking to anyone?
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And you're probably not quite at that point yet with BlinkPay, but in those larger organizations, how much was things like data and around that broader set, when you've got all of those users on that beta app and things like that, how hard is it to actually drill down and analyze that and get information out that is, both thematic and relevant and helps you make those decisions? Because the analysis must be a real hassle for a lot of people.
Yeah, so interestingly, in Barclays, when I was there in the UK, when I first arrived, we had reasonable analytic capabilities, but I would suggest that at the time when I joined in 2000, when was that, 2011? It wasn't as close to industry, the top end of the industry. And so thankfully I was in an organization that worked really hard to maximize its use of data we had this phrase, can we turn data into insight? Like, can we do something actionable with this thing? And so thankfully we had a really progressive organization that spent a lot of time bringing in the right skill sets and the tools. Actually, we had too many tools. That was part of our problem. We had so many tools. But what it meant was we had a lot of really clever guys, big brainiacs trying to crunch through the data. And you're right, at some point you get to a piece around analysis paralysis. You have so much data that it's really hard to see the wood for the trees. And so that happens. And there's lots of really cool models and capabilities that deal with that. But for us, we try to stay as focused as possible on kind of the core problems or challenges and journeys or product sets that we're trying to solve for. So trying to solve real life problems. And in particular, one of the things that we orientated around was trying to address complaints around when things didn't work. That really helped keep us focused around looking at the right data sets and not getting lost in data. I think the big risk that many large organizations come across is they get swept up in the idea of more data is better. And so then there's attempts to acquire other parties' data to build really complex models. But in my experience, making that all work and stitching it together is a difficult thing, because a simple thing like a carriage return can throw out a data model because all of a sudden it does not compute, does not go.
Yeah.
So, crunching all the data is a bit of a challenge. And obviously there are better tools for that coming out every year.
The secret sauce to success with a lot of organizations is not just what they do, it's the culture behind it and how they do it. And you alluded to it at the start, in and around coming in with a charismatic Māori founder organization. You wanted to come back, reconnect with the roots, make a difference, make an impact. How much or how important is that, not just to you, but do you think it is to the future and the success of the business, incorporating that Māori culture and what you're doing? Is there an impact around attitudinal, with the way that you communicate with your partners, the way you work collaboratively internally? What's the internal sort of like philosophy and feeling and around that?
Yeah, so as a Māori first technology company and a Māori fintech, as Dan likes to call us, we have a really strong sense of values born of tikanga and driving the way we think and act and behave. So as an example, I think most New Zealand organizations, which is really cool, by the way, actually have Māori values, which I think is brilliant. And for us, we have this really key idea that, culture equals values times behavior.
Yes.
Like if you can say this is our value, but if then you behave in a way that's opposite there, like you might say, we value integrity, but we don't keep our promises, then that doesn't really stack up. And so we tend to lean towards this idea that it's good to have a stated value, what we stand for, but it's also equally important to articulate how you go about that day to day. And so as an example, we've got one of our kind of key values from a cultural perspective is mahitahitanga, the idea of being a supportive team. And, our tagline of what it is basically, it means we're kind, we're family oriented, we're compassionate, we're welcoming, we show humor, there's a high trust environment, we're accountable, open, and transparent. And then the how part, the behaviors part is, and we show this when we are communicating early and often, we're offering to help each other, we're listening, we treat others how we want to be treated, we laugh every day. Bunch of Māoris, it's very hard to not laugh at least once per meeting. And we always assume good intent, right? So, sometimes people will come out the same problem with very different lenses. And so the whole idea is we assume that whatever position they're coming from, there's really good logic and context that says this is the way to go. And so it's our job to then try and listen to that and understand it. And so essentially what Dan has inculcated as part of the BlinkPay team is it's this kind of this slightly hapu based family kind of worldview on sort of, if you're going to be in our little tribe, then we're going to take this approach and this is how we're going to behave and be.
I love that, man. And you know what? I don't know, I could probably count on one hand people in other organizations that when I ask that question can actually articulate their values. Because all too often in the corporate world, those values are words on a wall.
Yes. And we felt similar to the Bushido Code, right? It's about living this virtuous life of this is what we stand for and this is how we do it. And we really wanted those things to connect. And so that's then threaded throughout the entire organization. And so we constantly are trying to find ways to lift each other up and challenge each other in constructive ways, but also recognize that we're all in this together. We're all trying to achieve similar goals. And what helps too is because we're a Māori company, we're mostly Māori, we have a similar internal belief system that's also born. So it means that we can communicate ideas very quickly with subtle eyebrow gestures. And we can also stop an overly convoluted conversation with a single word. I was having a kōrero the other day with one of our key customers, and I asked a question that sort of asked the individual in particular to articulate some of the challenges they had with the supplier, and he just looks at me, goes, "Hoha, bro." And in that moment, all of us went, "Okay, move on." Like there was no need for a long-winded answer or an over explanation as to what the challenges were in a politically or diplomatically correct way. He just said, "Hoha, bro." And then we moved to the next point.
Brilliant. So does that then flow through into those, especially in the B2B to C environment, and you're trying to develop this product that is in essence for the end user, making their life simple? Do those cultural values and beliefs have that flow through in regards to how you design the product and the process that you're going through to actually do that user testing and what are the outcomes that you're trying to affect? Or is it simply, as long as it's making paying bills less painless, I'm happy?
So it does translate, because when we go to approach the conversation, we try to approach conversations in a respectful way. So a part of Tikanga is when you in a hui, in a meeting, and then you basically get up and introduce yourself, who you are, why you're here, and your background. And so whenever we are in meetings and sessions, we do that to try and help orientate both ourselves and others in the meeting, especially if we're new to it or someone else new to the meeting. It then gives you a sense of everyone's perspective, where they're coming from, which then allows you to then frame up their responses through something that makes sense, right? Because nothing worse where you're sitting there and I might be talking digital product. And some guy turns around and says, digital product, stupid. And I'll be like, what? And then you discover that that individual actually has no understanding whatsoever of that, and their expertise in something related to the kōrero, but not crucial in that moment. So having tikanga to guide us and the value system to help us then address that is a really useful way of doing things. And to your point around talking to customers, because we seek to understand, we're always forever asking as many questions as possible, and giving people as much space to articulate what's going on, because every conversation, every kōrero we have, we're getting vital information as to ways that we can improve what we're doing, our product set, to try and enhance the product market fit that we're trying so hard to get, and to try and make things as painless as possible. And so it's interesting, some of the most insightful things have come from throwaway comments or hey, have a look at this. And then you look at it for one intended reason. And then you see that, well, actually, there's this unintended thing over here that's happening that actually might be the point. And so it also helps to engage in that cordial read or that dialogue, ways that you potentially might have to pivot the product in order to better meet of the people you're dealing with. So it's very much a case of, we like to collaborate as often as possible and co-create. And that's a very big part of culturally what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to do things in harmony. One of the things about Māori we all get very excited about is we're not really into terraforming that which is around us. We more try and sort of fit in and work with in an organic and together symbiotic kind of way. And so that generally tends to pervade itself when we engage in conversation and cordial.
Mm-hmm. And you're part of the Amotai network with suppliers and out there and things like that. And there is all sorts of discussion in and around like things like government mandates around 5% and things like that. And look, that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in supplier diversity and what it actually will end up meaning for the end user. Because I think if we're stuck in thinking in one mindset in one way and working with limited options, your cultural bias just will automatically restrict the options that you end up having and the outcomes that you get. So I'd be really keen to hear from your guys' perspective, how supplier diversity can enrich not just the supplier experience, but the customer experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, it's about diversity of thinking. And oftentimes, and sadly for we Māori, we over-index in a number of ways that aren't flattering. And so if you're trying to design a solution for various aspects of society, for me, it's logical to include those people in the consultation process. With the greatest respect to other parties who are out there doing this sort of thing, if you're trying to design solutions for people you're not talking to about who are impacted by it, chances of it being off the mark are pretty high.
Yeah.
And so from a diversity perspective, having that diverse thinking, it also then introduces ideas or concepts you may not be aware of. So when I was engaged recently by a previous employer, and I was asked a question around digital identity and sort of what does that mean from a Māori perspective, I said, well, there's a few issues. Number one, from a digital identity, if someone's taking a stab in my face and I've got maka on, and then that could potentially get reused without permission because someone says, well, I've taken a photo, I now have the ownership of that. No. That maka on my face represents my whakapapa, my people, my relationship to my iwi, to the land, to the whenua. No, you don't just take a photo and then own that. No, that doesn't work that way. Another thing, a real simple thing, right? We're looking at sort of storage of data. And like a photo database, for instance, on a marae situation, you would never put pictures of the mate, the dead, with the living. It's one of those tikanga things that I won't bore you with all of the background story to it, but living and dead we don't really like that. And so the idea of putting photos in a database where everyone's kind of clumped together, no. So, pretty simple solution. Well, let's partition it out and give people a flag so they can identify those who are living from the dead, and you can then partition that information out. Another thing we're not fans of, if you just ask, is our data, which is in part of our own essence, our own wairua, being taken and stored overseas. That's like us being taken from our own land.
Yeah.
And so again, something we'd be like, AWS cloud servers in Australia, probably not. And so there's some really cool local Māori initiatives actually dealing with that. And
around data sovereignty.
Yeah. And one of a really cool guy. Actually, I won't name drop him, but there's a really cool guy who's recognized that fact, and he's actually been building databases for marae so they can then store whakapapa on site in situ.
That's cool.
And it's something that's peculiar to us Māori, but it's one of those things where if you're unaware of it, what would you do about it? How would you solve for that?
Just want to come back around to one point that you made before that actually just stuck in my head, where you're saying that you can ask these people all these sort of structured questions and everything like that, and then you finish up and you're having a casual chat and they make reference to something and you go, maybe that's part of the solution. How many times And is it, and how important is it to build up that trust so that you can get that unfiltered feedback? Because I've seen it so many times that you can spend an hour with somebody and you can ask all sorts of questions, and it's the last 5 minutes where all the gold comes, where they just release.
Yeah, so my personal viewpoint is, if you want to, people conduct business with people. And so in order to do that, there needs to be a level of trust. Otherwise, if you don't trust someone, you're not going to do business with them, right? And so a critical part of building relationships is building trust and robust relationships. And how we go about that is critical, because if you have a trust and robust relationship, then, you can answer pretty much any question, ask any question and get an honest reply. And I think this is where I find myself quite anomalous coming back to New Zealand financial services industry, because the banks don't generally tend to talk too transparently with each other, because obviously there's commercial law potential and considerations and impacts. But I roll up, and I've done banking for a long time. I'm not in banking, and so they're quite happy to have a dialogue with me, because I'm not really the competition. I'm just someone who gets it.
Yep.
And so that ability to get to, it's like the old ice cube analogy, not the ice cube, the iceberg analogy, right? Where the tip above the water is typically what you see, and all the interesting stuff's beneath the water. And so for me, it's always asking what I refer to as the or question. And what else? Is there anything else? Or anything else we need to think about? Always trying to just get beneath that surface level understanding, or what's top of mind. Because oftentimes I've found, similar to yourself, typically the third or fourth idea is actually the big one.
Totally. Mate, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. I'm conscious of your time as much as anything else. What's the best way for people to find out more about BlinkPay and what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go onto our website, blinkpay.co.nz, we're also on LinkedIn. At the moment, we've got 3 products that we're building on open banking rails and APIs. So one of them we call BlinkPay now, and it's a debit product, and it allows you, like a payment gateway, to connect it to a payment gateway, hit pay now, and then carries all that information. And then you sign into your own online bank, and then you make the payment from your online bank, but we carry all the data in there for you, so you don't have to think about that part. So slightly different to some of the other solutions out there, which take your bank information and then kind of do it in their own space, which we find awkward and uncomfortable. And so we prefer to sort of say, look, we're going to send you over here. You're going to log into your own bank. That's where you're going. You send the payment from there, but we'll just pre-populate everything for you. You just have to hit go. So that's kind of one of our key products. And our other marquee product, which is coming out next year, is it's called enduring consent from the API industry, which is the ability to set digitally a recurring payment. So which will then enable new payment methodologies. So you could set up a subscription payment, which is obviously the holy grail of digital income, Netflix style subscription. You can do that in minutes on your digital device. Also, it has the ability to do variable recurring payments. So similar to a direct debit, when payments go up and down, it'll make that payment for you if you want to set up that way. But also it has the ability, because it's set up digitally, you can amend it very quickly. You don't have to go through the whole process of resetting up the direct debit and doing the 10-day stand down, which is currently in play. So those are that and our bills products. Those are 3 key products we're working on at the moment.
Very cool, man. You guys are at the forefront of getting ahead in this sort of area, and loving hearing what's coming out, loving the mindset and the attitude that you guys are taking into it, and cannot wait to carry on and see the journey as it unfolds, because no doubt there are massive things on the horizon for you all.
Oh, indeed. And we're really trying really hard to try and do something that we think will benefit New Zealanders in aggregate, because I feel personally that us Kiwis, we don't know we're getting a bad deal, because, well, the ones who've been overseas and come back, they can see it, but for all the rest of us who've been here the entire time, it's not as obvious, because it's your day-to-day. And so we believe in better because we've seen it, in some cases built it. So we want to build it here for us Kiwis, so we're getting the same benefits of speed and execution and ease that others have.
Love it, mate. And I have no doubt that we will have you back on in the not too distant future and see the massive strides forwards that you have all made. Appreciate it. And thanks again.
Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening into this episode, which is made possible by the team at touchpointgroup.com, a customer intelligence company you can partner with to rapidly translate your customer feedback data into actionable insights that will enable you to prioritize actions that make a demonstrable difference. You'll find a link to their website in the show notes. Thanks again. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and see you soon.